Evening, folks. You're welcome along once more to another edition of the Irish F1 show. A very much jam-packed F1 show, I have to say, this evening. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Irish F1 show. Give us an old subscribe on YouTube or a follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or even a 5-star rating helps massively, because we can tell you that with a great degree of confidence, because once again today we're back on the top of the Apple Podcast charts in the sports news category, which we're absolutely thrilled about. So thanks to every one of you who have hit the 5 stars, who have listened, liked, subscribed, shared, all that jazz. Very much appreciated indeed. We are, of course, looking back on Japan, and obviously we held off to bring the broadcast to you this evening on the back of some budget cap news, which we have and we will discuss. But before we do all that, we'll bring in our guests, Barry Rabbit and Richard Carney. Evening, gents. How are you?
Right, Kev. Energy.
Well, lads, we used up a lot of energy over the weekend for various different reasons. Barry, you had an impromptu trip to Brands Hatch, a nice day's racing by all accounts, and you enjoyed it.
Yeah. A day trip to Brands Hatch yesterday, courtesy of saleseye.com. That's sales over software sort of set up. The buddy of mine's involved with. He got us a few tickets to it. So yeah, it was great. We were over there, spent the day with Paramax Racing. Full access. It was great to see from behind the scenes, so to speak. Yeah, good fun day at Brands. So, unfortunately, their own car ended the whole weekend on its roof, which wasn't ideal, but plenty of coverage for the sponsors, I suppose.
Next stop, the paddock, Richie. Next stop, the paddock, bye.
I get the BTCC tickets. I'll leave it to you boys to organise the F1 VIP ones, yeah?
Good man, yeah. Sure, look after the small job. That's sound deal.
That's sharing out.
We'll give a shout out to PFT Travel and to Rapco. This lovely sign behind us. Finally made it down in time for our interview with Lee McKenzie. Thanks to Barry, I'll thank you as well while you're here, but Keaton and the boys in Rapco for looking after that. PFT Travel is now PFT Travel on Facebook as well. MJ got it changed over from P Feral Transport Limited with some degree of difficulty, but he got there in the end. So thanks once again to our sponsors. Lads, I don't really know where to start. I suppose the most recent news is probably the best place, because it's only over the duration of today where we found out a little bit more about what's going to happen with these budget caps, etc., etc., etc. And from reading down through it, to give it, I suppose, before we give the official line on it, the thing is so loose that it's hard to know what's going to happen. But because it's so loose, you can see absolutely fuck all be none about it, and an appeal is going in for that reason, which is probably going to be upheld. Am I too cynical, Brian Rabbit, in saying that?
I don't think so. I don't even think it's cynicism. I think it's almost unworkable from what I'm reading behind the scenes, or on all the channels and Twitters and all the rest of it. It's so complicated, and there's a bit of me kind of going, I want to see cars racing each other. I wanted to be an accountant. I wouldn't be half as interested. I might just be an accountant, it's not interesting, lads. It's just not interesting. So I think it's sad that, we had a race at Suzuka, probably the best track in the world, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions. It was wet. The championship was decided. There was, great dicing through the field. And Monday morning, we're all talking about bloody budgets and accountancy and protocols, and no, I'm sorry.
There's as much about that today, Barry, as there is about Max being a 2-time world champion. That's
more, I'd say.
That's the point you're hitting, yeah.
Yeah. Which I know why I know why we're talking about it. I understand the implications it has and everything. It's just, I don't know. Like, Rich will tell you this: never add up what you spend going motor racing like that. Don't do that. Like, that's a really bad idea. I remember one lad, he kept it all on a spreadsheet, kept the whole cost of everything on a spreadsheet for when he went racing. Do you know how many seasons he did? 1.
Half.
And then he gave up because he knew what it cost. The rest of us are in denial. So I don't know why. That's a bad idea to keep that idea cost of what it costs to go racing. Is not a good idea at all. And I don't think that changed when it gets to F1. But to go back to I'm being a bit facetious. Go back to your point. Yeah, it seems like, why did they put off the announcement for the 3 or 4 days? It was supposed to be last Wednesday. Then they pushed it back to Monday. And then the announcement was actually a non-announcement. They just said what everybody knew, which was, that there was a procedural error with Aston Martin. There was something else with Williams, which we knew about, a small thing. And that Red Bull had exceeded the budget. Well, sure, we all knew that. that's not news. Like, there was no actual information in the press release. It didn't say that that Red Bull had exceeded it by X amount of million, and the penalty was going to be Y, and the implications were going to be Z. It was just it was a non-event, the press release in itself, which has just created more questions and carried the whole thing on further, to the point that it's just, like you said, it's now become the main topic of conversation around the whole sport, which is a
Well, do you
pity.
know what? Before I bring in Richard Carney, let's go bore people to death with some of that statement and Red Bull's subsequent statement, right? Yeah, brace yourself, folks. You're going to be absolutely transgressed and transcended here with excitement, just as I am at the prospects of having to read this fucking thing out. But anyway, the review of the reporting documentation submitted has been an intensive and thorough process, and all competitors get their full support in providing the required information to assess their financial situation during this first year of the financial regulations. A statement reads: the FIA Cost Cap Administration notes that all competitors acted at all times in a spirit of good faith and cooperation throughout the process. The FIA would also note that with respect to this first year of the application of the financial regulations, the intervention of the FIA Cost Cap Administration has been limited to reviewing the submissions made by the competitors, and that no full formal investigations were launched. No need for sleeping tablets tonight. The FIA Cost Cap Administration is currently determining the appropriate course of action to be taken under financial regulations with respect to Aston Martin Red Bull, and further information will be communicated in compliance with the regulations.
That
Yeah,
is, I heard every word of that, but I don't think I know what you said.
that's kind of like that. Do you know that quote? The opportunity of a lifetime can only be what is it? Seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. Now that makes a bit of sense when you think about it, but this takes as much thinking, but still to me reads like double Dutch. But anyway, the statement from Oracle Red Bull Racing: we note the findings by the FIA of minor overspend breaches of the financial regulations with surprise and disappointment. Our 2021 submission was below the cost cap limit, so we need to carefully review the FIA's findings, as our belief remains that the relevant costs are under the 2021 cost cap amount. Despite the conjecture and positioning of others, there is, of course, a process under the regulations with the FIA which we will respectfully follow while we consider all the options available to us. So theirs is minor and procedural, and Aston Martin's, I think, is procedural. Again, I'm lost on this one. Mike Dermody is after commenting in. Even the Mike House things with you, lad. He has said, for what is listed as a minor transgression, that won't change anything. Richie, your thoughts on all that absolutely incredible, mind-boggling spiel that I've just had to read out?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay awake here. I totally agree with what Barry has said on this subject. I don't really feel we need to say a whole lot more about it. Like I said it last week on the podcast, and I'm just going to touch on another aspect of this that I can't understand. Barry, you're in business, I'm in business. Kevin, you know your stuff, right? Barry, if your business is being audited in the morning, like, I suppose the point I'm trying to get at is, how did this get out in the public domain? More importantly, like, it's like you had your auditor with you for the day, Barry, and he went down and had 5 or 6 pints that evening and started telling the lads in the pub, Jesus, Rabbit is spending this, and this. And he's like, how did that get out in the public domain? That's what I'd love to know. Regardless, like, and I said it last week as well, Kev, like, minimum infringements. That the worst they'll get is a slap in the wrist and maybe a dig in the pocket. And that'll be the end of it. And not only did it destroy last week's race because of all the talk about it, we're actually sitting here talking on an F1 podcast about fucking budget caps and cost caps when we've just crowned the 2-time world champion, which is what, in my view, is what we should be talking about. All that's way above my pay grade anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
And we'll leave it at that. But it ties in nicely with where we're going as well, because a lot of the book is responsible for how Max was world champion yesterday and how it was interpreted and how it was read. And there's kind of like a bit of a chain of events here, right? Because going back, was it last year in Spa, this rule was written. And I'm not going to read out this rule, but basically the interpretation of that rule has, in many ways, I suppose, largely led to Max being crowned world champion. Surprisingly to everyone yesterday. I mean, it was the last thing I was expecting to hear. The interview's taking place. The next thing he's been told by none other than Johnny Herbert that he's just been crowned world champion. I mean, this whole thing is just bizarre. Like, where are you on this one, Barry? Because I need this explained to me a little bit and dumbed down, right? My reading of that, like everyone else, I would say, was that there was going to be, was it 19 points awarded to Max, probably 14 for second, and so on and so forth. So how and why and what is the story?
Well, I read that particular rule somewhere earlier, and I've wrote a few sets of rules over the years and for the club stuff we do here, you know, in Ireland. And the problem with rules is sometimes you need to write paragraph after paragraph after paragraph to just keep, you know, closing holes, I suppose, in arguments. And I can get very wordy and very long and very legalese type, even from a layman writing them like myself. Now, I had to read it a couple of times earlier. My understanding of what they've said is that ultimately the rule that everyone was, as it turns out, incorrectly applying, such as you mentioned there about the reduced points. The first line of the rule book says that if a race is stopped, now there is caveats after so many laps and everything else, but to simplify it, if a race is stopped and it doesn't restart, this percentage of points will be awarded. So in your case, 19. Where they've left the gaping hole is that they haven't said anything about if the race is stopped and then restarted, this basically doesn't apply. So what they've said is you have to read what's not there just as much as what is there. So as again, just to cover it again, if the race is stopped and doesn't restart, these percentages apply.
Okay, yeah.
So what that is saying is obviously very straightforward. What it's not saying and not making any reference to is if the race is stopped and restarted, then none of that subsequent sub-paragraphs has take it out and throw it away. It's irrelevant. It may as well not be in the book because the race restarted. Now,
I think though, Barry, because I read the rule as well, and like that I had to read it 4 or 5 times, and I think it was with Spa the race was stopped and it never officially restarted. And I think from my take on it, now I could be wrong here, but from what I can take of it, once the race is restarted and finishes, the race has to finish by a checkered flag.
Yeah.
Then it's full points. I think, Barry. No, I'm not.
No, you're right.
Like, I could be wrong as well.
No, you're right, and you're right, Richie. I should have said that once it's restarted and subsequently, I was presuming to finish, but yeah, it does have to be finished. So, but the silliness of that is that there's no then reduced points at any point at any stage in that procedure. So if it's so once you've got these caveats of a couple of laps taking place and being in the book. So let's say after 3 or 4 or 5 laps, the race is stopped. It restarts and there's 1 lap for whatever reason. There's only 1 more lap and then it's checker flagged. So you might have 5 racing laps in total, full points.
Yeah.
But now, you can do 20, 26 the other way, the opposite end. You've argued, and only get maybe a percentage of points if it's a 53 lap race or whatever, like we say. Yeah.
Yep. So the problem they have is, and this is what always happens when you start writing rules, is the rules start eating themselves.
Yeah.
Basically, because you've just so many of them, and you're trying to nail this down, and by nailing this down, you leave a gap over there. So you write another rule to close that gap, but that actually inadvertently opens another one back over here. And next thing, the book goes from 2 or 3 pages to a bloody phone directory, basically, or worth of rules. And then obviously you have difficulty in just memorizing them and knowing them and learning them. Which in turn, if you want to bring it all the way back, probably somewhere along the line brings you back to things like Abu Dhabi 21, where no human being could possibly know verbatim a 400-page document and be expected to, off the top of his head, pull the right one from it under a hugely stressful situation in 20 seconds. But if the rule book was 5 pages, different story. And you could expect someone to know that, and you would expect someone to know that. So I think they need to probably take a shredder to the rule book and start again, and stop trying to close off every eventuality and just accept that there's going to be situations where it's going to be someone's opinion, and you can't legislate for every variable and eventuality. But they've left them. I think they've just made a balls of writing the rule in this case. In trying to clean up a rule to stop Spa, they've created a bigger monster.
Richard, before I bring you in on this, right? So I would think, Barry, with your experience of writing rules and all before, minimize room for interpretation and cut out room for discretion, and you probably have something that's a little more solid. And it's not
hard to do though.
Very hard
to do. Very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
Very hard to do without going into paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. You can write a rule in one sentence, but you have to write the rule based on what everyone else might think. So it's it's complicated. It really is complicated, and it's with ball games or tennis or whatever else, it is a much more defined arena, that you're racing in or competing in. There can be more solid rules. You can stop the event, make a decision, whether that be just a referee taking a moment. You can stop the event. You can go to TMO or whatever up in the stands. You can, I know there's VAR thing in football, which is the little I do know about it is it's a big I see it all the time. People giving out about it, and you have the Hawkeye in tennis and all this sort of stuff. But you can stop the
did
event.
they have an F1 team one time?
Yeah, Villeneuve drove for them. They were shy. But you can I'm thinking there's another one in there that have a similar name, but I got to put the anorak away for a minute. But you can stop the event. You can't stop 20 cars doing 200 mile an hour around a racetrack to have a look at the book. Are we all happy? Yeah, we're grand. Yeah, all right, lads, back in first gear and off you go again. So it's not the same. It's never going to be the same. And people, the old F1 Twitter type thing, people calling out for, absolute black and white rule making and rule interpretation and decision making. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Get over it, live with it, enjoy the sport for what it is and move on. But you'll always find remember 8.5 years ago in the 15th lap of the San Marino Grand Prix, he did it. It doesn't matter. It's probably 5,000 things different in that situation to the one you're comparing it to today. It's just the nature of the sport.
Mm-hmm. Right, let's go back all the way to the weekend. And I suppose Friday, I was just actually thinking when Alonso was quickest in, was it FP1, I think it was, it brought me back to the comment that you had made in relation to a question I'd asked about Alonso, would he be capable of winning if he was still in a good car, which I asked Liam McKenzie last week. And she said, absolutely. So there you go, boys. No better endorsement to get. Well done. So Saturday, Richard Carney. Where in the name of Jesus was Latifi going? Or where did he think he was going?
Literally.
Was he going in for a bag of chips, do you think? Or what was going on? I don't know what was on. Man, what the hell?
He thought he seen
something weird with the car then. Something weird with the car.
It must be a sign, Tesco on the next exit or something. And then to pull in and say, the car feels weird. That's because you've just gone off the circuit, you madman.
It would feel weird, wouldn't it? You just drove it the wrong fucking way.
That was Jesus, we've seen quite a lot of stupid stuff happen over the years. To actually take the wrong part of the circuit. Yes.
But if he starts laughing there, I'm not going to say it's not funny, but it's definitely less funny. It's the comment that makes it funnier. Do you know what I mean? Talk about taking a hole.
Trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's the car's fault.
Yeah. Shit, lads, I'm after taking the wrong turn. It's just the car feels weird. And the whole world looking at him after taking the wrong piece of track.
Yeah.
Mike's back in touch, Richie. He says he was looking for the Order of Malta. I know that's in relation to Barry. Yeah. I know you're not of the GA variety, but Richie joined me on the Left Wing Back podcast for a commentary on our local club's county final the other day. And this whole term of a hospital pass in field sports, where the pass is so shit, it puts your teammate in danger of literally running the risk of ending up in hospital. But the Order of Malta, as we know, who do great work. We're brought into it this time. That had Order of Malta written all over it or something, was what Richie said. So yeah, I thought that was quite funny at the time. Good man, Mike. You're bringing out the big ones here. But anyway, so that was, look, I'll move on from quali because there was so much happening in the race that I know there was a lot happening in quali too, but let's just go on to the race, right? the drama of it. Firstly, have to put the hand up, lads, right? Great intentions of getting over 6 o'clock. Did not fucking start till about 20 to 8. Missed 3 laps. Absolute gold. It was just like a blessing in disguise. It was like they knew, the people of Japan knew, this race cannot start till the lad is out of bed. Richie still wasn't out of bed, I'd say. Richie wasn't out of bed till 2 o'clock yesterday. I don't think.
I know, I got up and I sat and I watched and I was so convinced that the race wasn't going to restart. I went back to bed.
Yeah, you were like, there is God. But anyway, looking at it from the outside in, science going off, could have been a lot nastier than what it was. We had the massive weight. The weight in general, lads, we've touched upon this last week, Richie, I think, in relation to the rain and stuff like that. But Barry, you weren't with us last week. So I'll ask you, I mean, is it too obvious to say, right, there's full west there, lads have raced in more dangerous conditions, or are we now at a stage where we just can't fucking go on unless there's some degree of safety, or was it safe enough anyway? Like, where is this whole thing? Is this nonsense, or is there some balance in between here to be got?
Just let me say something, Kev. Right, when I said that last week, I and I've said it a couple of times on this show that, like, lads, just have full wet tires, get out in the second race. Like, these are the 20 best drivers in the world, seemingly, blah blah blah. But what I've never realised until this weekend, and I sort of have to take it back a little bit and hold my hands up here, is I never realised how shit the full wets were compared to an intermediate. And it struck me as like there's something 4 seconds a lap slower than the intermediate. So I do take it back a bit, and I do understand now why, because not why the drivers don't want to start on them. They'll start on them if they all start on them. But if, like, Russell or someone jumps in and gets on the intermediates first, takes a chance, and it works out for him, he's automatically going 4 seconds a lap quicker than everyone else. So I let Barry take over here, but I just want to take that back a bit. I never realised how poor a tire they were until this weekend.
Apology accepted, Richard.
Well, I'd agree with you, Richie, and I probably came to the same conclusion. I would have held a similar opinion prior to the weekend too about the wets. Although it always kind of in the back of my mind going, well, these lads know more than me. There must be something to it, but it was never blatantly obvious until this weekend. It's just how inadequate the wet does seem to be, as Richie has said, because there's no way those conditions that we seen in Japan at the start of the Grand Prix should be an intermediate tire over a wet, like, I'm not saying over the F1's wet tire. I'm just saying if you just insert generic intermediate tire here, insert generic wet tire here, that was wet tire conditions. So the fact that the intermediate is better than the wet shows how poor the wet really, really is in F1. And I actually seen something today from Verstappen basically saying something similar, just saying the wet is atrocious. It's just, it doesn't dispel enough water, and I presume it's too hard, or the compound is something wrong with it. But it's pretty much only useful for driving around behind a safety car and throwing water in the air. And Verstappen was saying that, let's go testing. Let's all go testing and get some decent wets available to us, because the wet is so poor. And an intermediate is supposed to work on a fundamentally dry track that has that's damp but without puddles. A wet works in the rain, hence the name. So I think there's something definitely there. Maybe they need to get rid of the intermediate and make the wet a little bit better.
I was talking to a guy today. It was like talking to Mike that's commenting there, and I was saying, like, something needs to be done here. Pirelli need to do something even if they could do something for the rest of the season. But something could be done here, because, I mean, as we're always saying, and we're always giving out about happening in Spa last year, right? So let's just say the three of us decided, right, lads, we're going to go to Spa for the weekend, take in the Formula One. Going to cost us $2.5-3 grand again. We have everything said and done, and we're back home and sitting on our couches. And you go to Spa, and you get to watch 20 Formula One cars do 3 laps behind the safety car. Like, that's just not on. Like, it's not fucking good enough, basically. And the same the weekend in Japan. Like, you pay whatever amount. Like, Formula One is not cheap to go to, as you know. Like, and then to watch teams not want to put their cars or not start a race because the wet tire is so shit. You see, this is something I never realised until last weekend. And I can actually see now why teams don't want to start a race on these wets. And another interesting stat that Mike gave to me there today was the full wet dispatches 100 litres of water per second, right? So if you add up the 4 tyres dispensing that water, there's the guts of a ton of water in the air. So you can understand how visibility is unbelievably poor. And I'll be honest, Barry, I'd say you'll agree with me. Watching some of the onboards from the weekend, it was it was bad. Like, it was
scary looking, lads.
It was, like, in fairness. Just like, for to future-proof this, I feel like, and I just put this out here, I think it was Jack Villeneuve said this a good few years ago, and he got laughed off the planet for it. But you know something? He might be onto something here. Why not, like, put the decision into the organizers' hands and say, all right, like Osprey Racing, the officials call it a wet race. So you have a couple of procedures. Obviously, you turn your rain light on, you put your wet tires on. So why not let the organizer say, all right, guys, you all have to start in full wets, and we decide when you come off the full wets, not ye. That's one idea I had. And then I was saying, like, why not, let's say about Jack Villeneuve, why don't you put mud guards on the cars on a wet day, right? Well, and like I said, at the time, he got laughed out. But on reflection, 4 nice little quick fit winglets that dispenses the water back down to the circuit, or I don't know, something that gives drivers better visibility. Like, I don't know what your thoughts, Barry or Kevin, are, but I mean, Formula One is an expensive sport. For fans to go and watch it and not be able to watch Formula One cars race because of poor drainage at circuits and the cars themselves on a shit wet tire, and there's an awful lot of stuff that could be done here to future-proof this.
Yeah, a couple of things, Barry, before you come in. Sorry, Mike's been in touch, and he said it's 75 litres a second, Richard, 300 litres per car. 2 cars side by side is over half a ton of water spraying. Blind driving.
Yeah, I bet you Mike is buried in the book reading about the financial cap. He's one of those solicitor types. He is.
Come on, Mike. You have the right to reply there, no problem. Barry, I'm going to bring you in on this, right? For me, you're better placed to answer anyway, but it doesn't seem like the worst idea in the world. And the other thing I want to add into this is, have we waited too long in the season, or has there been enough opportunities to actually put this wet tire out there? Why have we waited so long? Like, look how far we are into it. I know conditions have been pretty good for most of the season, yeah? But how is it this far into the year for everyone to realize on how shit the bloody thing is?
No, they
knew. They know all along.
The teams knew and have always known how crap it is. And that's now, what, as Richie is saying, how they're figuring out and why we're now coming to our kind of conscious as to, that's why they have never, we'd always be sitting there going, why do they just put on the wets? Like, but we were always presuming that the wet
was decent.
Was decent, Yeah. As I said, there's always something in the back of my mind going, there must be some reason for it, but I can't figure it out. Why don't they put on the wets? Now we know the reason, which is that they're just fundamentally not fit for purpose, like, in terms of producing a lap time. So the wet has two jobs. One is the safe, passage of the car around the track, let's say, right? And then the other is a lap time. A race team from Mondello to Monaco in F1 will ditch the safe bit and go for the fast bit every time, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're sitting there and you go, right, we can put these wets on the car and there'll be 3 seconds a lap slower, but they're fundamentally better at keeping the car on the track. But if we do that, someone else is going to put the intermediates on and make us look like idiots. So everybody puts the intermediates on. That's what happens. Until, like Richie says, it's taken out of their control. Richie's idea is a good one, saying, just like they can turn DRS on and off when they decide it's dry now. DRS is enabled. Now you can go to intermediates, lads. Or my idea is scrap the intermediates. Wets, you've got wets, you've got slicks. Like pretty much every other class on the planet. Very few classes have intermediates. It's pretty much an F1 thing. And you say to them, you've wet tires, we'll make them better. But even if they're not better, it doesn't really matter because they've all got the same tires. You've wet tires, you all have to use them, same tires. We've wet tires, and you move from wets to slicks. It'll make it a bit interesting too, because in a drying track, the wets will just get absolutely chewed up. So it'll bring a lot of strategy and stuff into it as well. And the big bonus of pushing them onto wets, whether it be my way by removing intermediates or Richie's way by telling them when they have to run them, is that you won't get the aquaplaning that we've seen, or I won't say you won't get it. The level of it it'll happen a lot less with wets. Basically, what happens is when you get aquaplaning, the tire is not going through the water; it's sitting on top of the water, and you're effectively like a boat on top of the water. It might only be a half an inch of water, but it doesn't matter if it's a half. If you're not touching the tarmac, you're not touching the tarmac. Whether you're half an inch off it or you're 12 foot off it, you're not touching the tarmac. So the wet tire will cut through the water by its treads, just like your road car. And then the bit in between the treads, the bit in between the cuts is the tread, and that sits on the ground. And the water gets like a comb running through your hair, basically. Now, if you take an intermediate, you have much less channels for the water to go through, so the tire will sit up on top of it sooner than the equivalent wet. So if they were all on wets, they probably would have been all 4 seconds slower, and there's a very high chance that Sainz wouldn't have spun, because he would much less chance of aquaplaning because he's got the tire cutting through the water. 4 seconds doesn't matter if everyone's 4 seconds slower. But so long as the intermediate is faster in wet conditions, they're never, ever going to use the wet. And the visibility is another thing. I think it's somewhat less of an issue because it's only going to be for a few laps until the grid in any wet race the cars will spread out just because of the visibility issue. Because you can't drive right up behind someone in many cases, or drivers won't drive right up behind someone because they can't see, and that will naturally spread the field out and improve the visibility. Coupled with a good wet tire that's throwing water up into the air and dispersing it off, it's still an issue, but only for a few laps, I'd say. But fundamentally, they need to get the cars onto wet tires. That will solve a lot of the problem, if not all of it.
Yeah, them boys think their problems with visibility. They should try go on the beer with Richard Carney and go about 6 or 7 points deep. You'll know what fucking poor visibility is then, let me tell you.
You know what? It's not dissimilar to looking through a point. I've done it in the single seat or whatever. You cannot see anything. There's no. You hear them talking about it, going, "Oh, I can only see in front." You can't. Like, honest to God, you're looking to your left and you're looking to your right. You're listening to the car in front. You're listening to maybe a car beside you. You're picking.
You know, when you're behind someone in the single seat and the rain light is on, and you're coming down the main straight or something. Next thing, that rain light starts to come at you very quickly. Brake. It's time to brake. Yep. It's time to brake. It's literally like it's like driving blind. It really, really is.
Yeah, I think that's something that's lost on. The cameras don't show it, very rarely show it, and I think it's one of the commentators often says the cameras tend to look down through it, whereas you're looking long ways through it, like through a tunnel of it, And
you know what, Barry? Only for I saw Alonso's helmet cam there today. Was it his helmet cam, or was it actually a camera just to his right? And you can see him going into that hairpin, right? And they're literally just depending on the lad in front to judge where the fucking corner is. That's how it looks.
Yeah, it's muscle memory too. You see, what you'll also have is you'll be going, right, I'm in 5th gear, I'm about this sort of RPM. That probably means it's about time to start braking. And then
you'll have landmarks, Barry, won't you? You'll have landmarks.
Your side.
You've something that's out to your left, and you go
peripheral.
Right, that's the right time to brake, or some. As Barry said, some drivers have different ways. But
be a combination of all of those things.
Yeah, your muscle memory, everything like.
Even curbs, you turn in and you go, that's the curb, right? Let the lock off. Okay, we're right, and then you run to the exit. That's the exit curb, right? Jesus, that combined with muscle memory, combined with what little you can see, combined with peripheral vision, engine cues, noises, all that sort of stuff. That's what you're relying on. Your eyes become, the normal look ahead, look left, look right is gone. So, it is pretty scary, and it sorts the men from the boys for sure. But I think it's something that will pass after a few laps anyway, in most cases. Now it'll be a hairy few laps, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that's not faced around the world. Like, it's not an F1 problem, it's a racing. This happens in all racing of all levels. You go faster in F1.
Serious,
yeah, Yeah, okay, the speeds are
basically.
higher, of course,
Yeah,
it being
yeah,
F1, but the visibility issue in itself is not an F1 specific issue. But I think they to just get back to the main point, I think they need to figure out a way to force the drivers, the teams, to use the wet tires
yeah.
in conditions like the other day. Whatever mechanism they use to do that is a separate argument. But somehow, as Richie says, this is a wet race, lads. We will tell you when it's time, when we will allow you to change onto intermediate tires, and they'll have some way of figuring that out. No different than the DRS enabled thing that they do at the moment.
Good man, Jack Villeneuve. Bring him back, boys. All is forgiven. Mike has. I sent Mike the link to jump on because he makes some really good points. I don't know if he's seen it here on WhatsApp yet, but he said, with all the new trackside upgrades, why not consider the asphalt self-drawn technology? It's not a dry road, but drains standing water. So that's another point made. Look, I'm
Get
going to
rid of
move
it,
on
yeah.
anyway here, right? Because
Yeah.
we've got so much more to get through, and I have to go on to the tractor next, because that was another big standout. Like, we haven't talked about the great epic battles which we've had, and we will get onto that as well. This podcast is going to take a little bit longer than what it usually does, but do you know what? It's for good reason. It's been really enjoyable as well over the last few days, in fairness, right? But this tractor thing, this goes back to 2014 when we sadly lost Jules Bianchi, right? Bianchi. And how on earth has something like this happened again? But I'm going to just double this in and say that I think it's unfair that some of the line of question that Pierre Gasly had to put up with was kind of taking this as kind of an all-in-one thing. So he made his points about the tractor and how dangerous it is and so on and so forth. I don't have the exact quotes here, but obviously not too impressed about it. And one of the questions back was in relation to the speed, but it was kind of moving within the same topic of the tractor. For me, it's two separate things. Obviously, the tractor thing is just bang out of water. And yes, obviously, he's obviously speeding during the red flag thing. I think it was unfair that he got caught up in that a little bit. What do you think? And also, what do you think of the penalty? So I think, is it 20 seconds, Barry? Am I right in saying that? And a few points as well. I don't know the exact amount of
Yeah,
points.
I think that was it. Yeah, I think he ended up going from what was it, 17 to 18. It was pretty inconsequential in terms of the actual result. But yeah, it did feel a little bit like, well, if you're going to give out to us, we're going to, give right back out to you, kind of thing. It technically they might have been
Sorry,
right.
I'm going to
but
jump across just to confirm. It's 9 on his super license for the 12-month period. You got 2
yeah,
there.
that's right.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah,
Go on,
yeah. So yeah, it did feel a little bit like, as I said, if you're going to have a go at us, we're going to have a go at you, kind of thing. Technically, the FIA were probably within their rights to give him that penalty.
Yeah.
But I think it just optically looked very, very bad for them. It looked like, but it doesn't surprise me in the slightest, because, as I said before, myself and Richie and most other club racers have come up against officials that, have questionable motives as to why they're there in a lot of cases. And as I always said, is it any surprise that the lads at the top of that particular greasy pole in the FIA and F1 are, they're the way they are, because they've climbed that pole through club racing, national racing, European racing, and generally speaking, they're never wrong in their own minds anyway. So, it doesn't surprise me when I see this sort of stuff coming out of FIA and F1. They'll always find a way to make sure that they're right. But to the point at hand, he didn't exceed any of his deltas for the safety car speed. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware, when a safety car comes out, the track is broke up into sectors, and there's a time on the driver's dash that's a plus and a minus of a 0. So 0 is ideal, and plus or minus of that. And basically what it says is, when you come to X point on the track, and it'll literally be a line in the ground with a laser type thing, or a little wire in the ground, basically, that your beacon picks up. You must arrive at that point no sooner than a pre-described time. And if you're ahead of that time, it'll say you're -2 on the screen. So you're 2 seconds ahead of the time you're going to arrive at that point, and that'll be wrong. So they slow down till it goes -2, -1, 0, and then they hold it at 0. That's their job, to hold it at 0. And they can speed up and slow down to do that. So when a safety car comes out, the drivers all get this plus or minus delta on their screen. And Gasly followed that and was the right side of it at each marker that he came to. including the one where he passed the tractor. What he got the penalty for was in between those markers, he exceeded a miles per hour speed that I didn't even know was aware that existed. But he like it's literally like a speeding fine going down the motorway. He still arrived at the next point at the right time. But, you know, it's like saying, well, I left Dublin and I drove to Cork. We did 150 mile an hour for 10 minutes in the middle of it, but you arrived at an average at the right time. You still did 150 mile an hour for 10 minutes. That's wrong. So that's what he got the penalty for. He didn't get the penalty for excessively going fast at the point of the safety car. And I think a red flag had kicked in the meantime, which triggered the ability to break that speed limit thing. Once a red flag, just some speed limit kicks in. And that's what they got him on. So it's just felt a little bit contrived to do him on it. But I'd agree with you, it's two separate things. And it's not unusual for a tractor or a crane or a piece of machinery to be on track during a safety car. We've seen that at Monza this year. Between the two Lesmos, one of the cars stopped, and you'll see a tractor or a teleport of some sort picking it up and the car is filing by it. So that's not the first time we've seen that this year. There was mitigating circumstances at the weekend whereby it was really, really wet, really bad visibility, and Gasly was pushing to make his way back onto the train. So I think it's a little bit unfair to completely hammer the FIA on it, because it's not the first time they've done this, and it has genuinely been procedure to put vehicles on track under safety car. Is that a good idea? Probably not. And maybe now we should look at that and say nothing goes on track until the whole group is caught back up again. But that'll trigger other problems, because if they do that, they're going to say, well, then they're going to have to close the pit lane, because if all the cars gather up and are behind the safety car, and then they say, right, put the tractor on the track now, and 5 seconds after they do that, whoever's at the back decides he's going to stop and put on a new set of tires. Well, now the cars aren't grouped up again, so you have to ring the tractor going, no, get off it again, because, you know, Albon has decided to pit, so now they're not all grouped together again. Right, okay, put them back on. Oh no, hang on a second. Schumacher's decided to pit so that's not going to work. So the only alternative there is to close the pit lane. So it's like what we spoke about earlier. You write a rule and then you go, oh shit, now I need to do this and now I need to do it. So they could write a rule that says, yeah, no tractor goes on the circuit until all the cars are behind the safety car. But that'll probably trigger them having to write another rule to close the pit lane. And then if they go that route, you know, and all of a sudden away we go again. And then in 4 months' time, something will happen and they'll go, oh, that's because of that loophole, because of the safety car, tractor, red flag, pit lane closed rule that now there's another 8 pages in the book of rules. So it's very, very difficult to nail it down. But at the same time, should an F1 car be driving by a tractor at 100 mile an hour in that sort of conditions? No. Ultimately, it shouldn't, because unfortunately, you know, Bianchi's accident is testament to what happens when that goes wrong.
It's a good job that Marshall had a bit of agility as well with the Sainz incident, because that could have been nasty enough too, and that's not been talked about that much in comparison to the tractor thing. It's obviously been talked about, and you can see it on social media. But yeah, it was another thing we're talking about. Just on the topic of Gasly and De Vries as well, I think last week, Richie, we were talking about, is this going to happen? Is it just pub talk? Is it bullshit? And lo and behold, De Vries going to AlphaTauri, and Gasly is gone to Alpine. So Max had kind of
Sorry, lads, I have a question, and hopefully you can answer this. Some lad with like 20 million followers or something announced the Gasly move. He's some football guy. Am I right? I've got totally confused about this. Did any of you see this? No?
Nope.
Right, okay.
No, that was me on last week's show.
If anyone's watching and they know what, there was some lad put it on Twitter and he said, I'm going to do F1 now for a bit. Gasly's going to Alpine. It's all been agreed. Personal terms agreed. You seen it here first or something like that. And everyone went mental. And I was like, what's going on here? Some randomer has an idea like more than the rest of us. And then I clicked on it and he's 20-something million. Like, so I think he's some football. I don't know. I'm really confused. Someone please.
Harry, as you well know, us here at the Irish F1 Show only go for official accredited sources.
Apparently, this was all set up by Alpine. to pre-announce it because he has got such a following. It wasn't complete. I don't know. I got very confused. Since this is why you
Probably
need to keep.
Mbappe or fucking Griezmann or
That's
something like that.
some French footballer
Yeah.
anyway. That's good mates with him.
Sign of the times,
Over
lads.
my head.
Sign of the times.
Anyway, someone who's watching,
What's happening?
just please let us know who this random bloke is because he seems to have bypassed all of us, but he knew before anyone else did.
Well, do you know what? I'll give you the opportunity to discuss, and I'll go do a bit of research here, right? While we're live on air. Ever the fucking pro, huh? De Vries, Max said that after his drive, it was at Monza, I think, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You right in saying that? That
Yep.
he suggested he go have a chat and see what would the lay of the land be. But obviously, he's involved with Mercedes and stuff, and the reading of it last week was it was a big blow, massive blow for Mercedes as Red Bull get one up on Mercedes and stuff like that. It does seem a little bit bizarre, and I'm sure there's a wry smile there somewhere from a Red Bull AlphaTauri point of view. Richie, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say I would make Red Bull feel like they've gotten one up on Mercedes. I'm surprised. Toto let it happen, to be honest with you. I honestly, it is Red Bull. Red Bull definitely got one up on Mercedes here with Nick de Vries anyway.
Yeah,
Hold on now. Is this? Am I getting this right or wrong? Because I've just gone and done some homework, right? It's not the bloody football agent Fabrizio Romano that's gone and announced this, is it?
I immediately forgot his name, so I don't know. But is he
No,
like
do you
a
know
well?
what? I think it is different kind of here we go today. For some minutes,
That's
I'll be
it.
into
That's
Formula
it.
One. I understand Pierre Gasly will join, blah blah blah, whatever. That's incredible. So this guy's a football. He breaks all the big football transfer news. If Fabrizio says it, it's basically fucking happening. So he's now delved into
So you
Formula
do
One, it
know him.
appears. Oh
You
yeah,
do know
yeah,
who
sure.
we're talking about.
He's well known. He breaks all the news. Like, geez, if you see him saying something is happening, it's basically happening most of the time. Anyway,
That's because
60% of the time it's happening all the time.
Yeah, 100% successful 90% of the time. Because he put it up and everyone lost their shit, and I was like, sure, who's this bloke? I don't know, some French lad just decided that, like, and it's completely lost on me altogether. And now you know who he is, so there we go.
Yeah.
But apparently it was like, I don't think he just found out down the pub. I think it was on stage by Alpine, because here we are talking about Fabrizio Giovanardi or whoever his name is. No, he was a touring car driver now. What was his name?
Fabrizio Romano.
Romano, yeah. No, Fabrizio Giovanardi, he raced British touring cars. Different guy altogether.
Tony Romano, I knew, was the chip producer in Bankstown and Carlo years ago. Not too many more of them. But anyway, that's the story there. With the Vries, that is very much a standout, and he's got a great future ahead. He looks like he is a serious operator. Gasly to Alpine, look, makes sense in fairness, doesn't it?
Yeah. He got a little test of it by racing the Formula Renault, I see, a few weeks ago. A car like my own, which is actually quite interesting. Did you see that, Richie? No?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was very good. Very good.
What I found interesting was just if you're not up to speed on it, Kevin, which how could you be?
I'm definitely not.
It was on his Fabrizio might have told you. It was on his I don't know, socials, one of Gasly, and basically he had the Formula Renault, like I race. There's a crowd in France that have about 8 or 10 of them, and they do like experience days where you can drive them. So, anyways, Gasly brought his brothers and some family members and some mates, 6 or 8 of them, to this place, and they did a day driving Formula Renaults. They shot Gasly getting out of the car. He obviously did a few laps himself in the AlphaTauri suit, the whole lot. Got out of the car, and he was absolutely buzzing. That's the only way you could describe it. He was, really excited, really like that. I was just going, that was incredible, that was amazing. I'm like, he's driving a Formula Renault, like that's the same as I have out in my shed. Like, he's an F1 driver. What's going on here? And it was really interesting. It definitely was genuine. And his comment coming out of it was, that's pure driving, and you're on the edge everywhere, and it's amazing, and I loved it, and it's the sort of car I raced 8 years ago or whatever, when it was one of his first junior championships. And it just got me thinking, that shouldn't happen. An F1 driver shouldn't get into a Formula Renault and have that sort of reaction, because it's so far down the ladder of performance compared to an F1 car. And it just got me thinking, like, are these cars just, we're on for a real tangent now, are they just getting too heavy, too cumbersome, too electronic to remove? Because he really shouldn't be that excited about driving a car like that compared to a Formula One car. And I just found it really interesting. I don't know if you've seen it, Richie, but it
Yeah,
kind of, it was
I did,
odd,
and
wasn't it?
I was like you. I was like, Jesus, he's a bit excited about driving a Renault, considering he's an
Yeah,
F1 driver. Like, but I suppose he jumped into the Renault. He's back in a much simpler, probably much easier, and to drive on the edge a lot simpler than an F1 car. So, and like he hasn't 50 million buttons on his steering wheel, or he
interesting though.
could just sit into that and like wring its neck.
I
And
get a buzz out of it.
you can understand how he'd really enjoy it, but I think you might be onto something there. Like 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, or nearly what are they, a ton weight now?
Yeah, they're heading on it. Yeah, I mean it's kind of like the Formula Ford I drove a little while ago, a couple of weeks back, and I think I said it to one of the lads. He asked how we got on. And I says, well, compared to the Renault, I says to him, well, it doesn't. It doesn't accelerate that fast. It hasn't got a lot of grip, and the brakes are only okay, but it's great crack to drive.
Yeah.
So like a lot, and every given metric, it was slower than what I normally drive, but was more fun at the same time. So maybe it's something similar to that. Just found it very interesting. Just found it very interesting. An F1 driver could be that genuinely hyped about driving a junior car, which obviously has good things to say about the junior car, but would more to the point would bring you to go, maybe these F1 yokes aren't as fun to drive as they could be.
Text
so
in,
no,
lads.
we'll have to get him on and ask him.
He didn't have to charge a battery, Barry. He could stay off the brakes and give it socks.
Yeah, well, has someone said that to us? Is that yourself?
No, comment in.
Comment in. No, well, he's
this
right,
is a scurrilous accusation. I'm making up text and sending it to myself. Jesus Christ. We are the number one podcast in the sports news category. This is a scurrilous accusation.
No, I just
first fight I'm not missing here.
Yeah, we should have known, Richie, because it's pretty much it's bang on the money. So we could have known that it wasn't Kevin that said it. To be fair,
it's so obvious it's not me. The rest are a bit obvious, all right. Anyway, look, that's
sorry, we got completely off topic there. So
no, it's great to listen to. It's great to listen to. Ricardo obviously is going to be taking some time out. He's going to be a loss in terms of the entertainment value that he brings. Things haven't gone his way. And yeah, I suppose this sort of thing can happen, and then I would expect that we'll probably see him back at some stage. Would you go along with that before I move on?
It's hard to know. He's pushing on a bit now. He'd definitely not be back with a top team. I couldn't see it happening. I don't know. It could be very difficult. Very same thing with Mick Schumacher. If he doesn't have a seat next season, it'll be very difficult for these guys to get back in.
Richard, we've been on this before, and Barry, you've been here for this particular topic as well. Ricardo's been the author of his own downfall in F1 as far as I'm concerned. It's a pity the way things have worked out, but he was in an incredible car, and the dollar, I think, was the money talks, and it's never spoken as loudly as it has now, because the man doesn't, he doesn't have a seat. Like, so anyway, that's the joys of it. We'll
tell you, Kevin, just on that point, I don't even think it was money. He was afraid of Max, as far as I'm concerned. He just didn't want to be Max's teammate, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, that's why he left Red Bull.
Yeah, I think
this is a lovely segue, lads. Sorry, now this is a lovely segue, right? Because I had a tweet up there yesterday about Checo Perez, and just thinking back over the last couple of years and what he's done, right? So he's had to step aside. And we were giving out stink with that at the time because things were quite close. But the work he's actually done in assisting Max to become world champion 2 years in a row. You go back to Abu Dhabi and look at what he did in terms of holding up Hamilton, and then tussling the other day with Leclerc and stuff, forcing him into the air, because he did force him into the air. He was up his hole for I don't know how many laps it was consecutively, and it was great to look at. And I suppose in a way he's played a massive part, and he's been a great teammate. But the question I have is: he the best teammate ever? Supporting driver, will say, and I don't think he would like us saying that about him, but that is ultimately how his role is kind of played out within the team. Eddie Irvine's been mentioned. have we got many others in the mix here?
You toss up between him and Valtteri Bottas, wouldn't it?
Do you reckon?
Well, sure,
Best
Bottas was the
teammate.
ultimate teammate for Hamilton. Like he stepped aside more times. He, you know, he fucked up his own race plenty of time for Hamilton, and I think like that Bottas wouldn't like you saying it about no driver like you said about, but it's sort of the truth. Like, and we spoke about this last week as well, Kevin. Unless Checo is happy enough to play second fiddle there, you know, I would have always said Perez would love to go and fight and get in the battle and try and win a world title, but I don't know. I just don't know.
Barrichello has been mentioned here as well.
Who? Sorry,
Rubens Barrichello.
Barrichello. Yeah, definitely. Barrichello, Irvine, those sort of guys. I think. I can't think it. There's names and they're escaping me now. But I think if you want to find the most generous teammate, if that's the way you want to frame it, I think you'd probably be going back to the 50s and 60s, really. Because in them days, so let's say using current drivers, Verstappen is out in a race and his car develops a misfire or something like that, and they have to retire it. In those days, back in the 50s, the teammate, i.e. Checo, they'd go, "Oi, Sergio, pull in here, right? You're out, get out." And Max gets into his car and finishes the race. That's the way it used to happen.
Was it Sterling Moss give up his car for Fangio? Are they the two drivers?
That's who I was thinking, Richie, but I didn't have I wasn't confident
endurance
enough to
races,
say it.
lads.
Yeah, but they was the same. They used to swap cars, Kev. So what happened is that you'd be leading the race or second, and the number one driver, Fangio, for example, would have a problem. Fangio would come into the pits. The next time by, his teammate, which could have been Moss, as Richie says, would be brought in, told, "Sorry there, boss, you're out. You're boss, not Moss. You're out. You're done. Early shower." And Fangio's getting in, and he's finishing the race in your car. It definitely happened. It happened with Hawthorne. Happened like it happened. It wasn't that once or twice. It happened in every race, probably with some teams. So I think if you go, I think
it was an interview with Sterling Moss I seen, and Fangio was pretty much, you know, he needed to win this race to near enough secure the championship, and Moss gave up his car for him. I'm nearly sure those are the two drivers, because in the interview Moss went on to say, "To be fair, Fangio let me win the next one."
Yeah, I think you're right, Richie. To be fair, I think you're right. I think it might have been those two. That was probably one of the more famous occurrences, but it was happening up and down the grid every other race. Like, so, yeah. To go back, but on more modern times, which is probably the bones of your question, Kev. It was, yeah. I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, Sergio has done a couple of spotlight type things like that, you know, for Verstappen, as you mentioned, Abu Dhabi last year, when it was Sergio's a legend or whatever, by holding up thing, and Hamilton, and then this year by, you know, putting Leclerc under pressure. But would a better teammate not have been ahead of the other two guys in the first place, or taking points off them on other days? Would that be about which would you rather, a teammate that was always between you and your competition, always robbing points to them, but maybe doing it in a more quiet fashion, than someone who was blowing hot and cold like Perez and getting two big spotlight moments that we're talking about? I think I'd rather the guy that was always sitting second ahead of the competition. I think he's probably a better teammate. Who that is, hard to know. I don't think it's Bottas, because on the years Schumacher, or on the years Hamilton won the championship, a lot of the time Bottas didn't finish second. It probably would be your Irvines, your Barrichellos, in the Schumacher era, most recently, would be the best one.
I suppose it's nice to just segue into this briefly, and maybe it's a podcast in itself, but who is the strongest pairing ever at a team at the same time? Because obviously we Prost and Senna at the one team.
Well, it'll be a pretty short podcast. I think that'll be it right there at the start.
Plain and simple.
Prost and Senna.
Yeah,
I think so. I think in any era that I could have any real knowledge of again, I'm always conscious of going back into the, you know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
the F1 didn't start in 1988 or whatever. Like, it's, you know, you could go back to your Jim Clarks and lads like that.
Within your knowledge base or your
yeah,
era
yeah.
or something is probably the best way of putting it. Like,
I think it's Senna Prost for me.
yeah, Richie.
I don't know the fact that they hated each other so much. Like, I don't know. Maybe they were. I won't say they were, and I won't say they weren't. There was so much hatred there between them, and the way things ended and stuff like that would put just a slight tarnish on it for me. But I'm trying to rack my brains here, and like,
but even though Richie, like, I suppose I accept that and all that, right? But it's the two lads that were almost, well, we won't say equal talent, but both capable of winning race on any given day, kind of on an even keel, because Checo is not as talented as Max, plain and simple. Bottas was nowhere near as talented as Hamilton. Rosberg and Hamilton, Rosberg had fucking loads of talent. You're not world champion for nothing, like, and we've seen it when they went toe to toe and collided so many times, right? Obviously Prost and Senna were like serious, but another one, Mansell and Piquet, Mike has sent in there, were strong.
Yeah, that's good.
Prost and Senna. So let's just take, I suppose, the quibs and qualms over it. The actual strongest two drivers to ever be at a team at the one time.
Oh, I see what you mean. So, in other words, the strongest two individuals that just happen to wear the same overalls, or the strongest team, the strongest team of which is more the sum of its parts kind of thing. I would. Well, my answer's the same. It's Senna. Prost. Yeah. To be honest, yeah.
Well, Richie, I'm sorry. I probably should have actually phrased it that way in the first place, but now you get the gist.
Yeah, when you put it that way, like as Barry said, two drivers that would you expect to win races wearing the same overalls. Yeah, you'd probably go Prost, Senna.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Done.
They wouldn't. As you said, Kev, they wouldn't be necessarily the best for the team, which is probably a slightly different thing too. You know, that it wouldn't be the most harmonious teammates. That's for sure.
That's what I meant. That's the point I made. That's what I was sort of thinking. Hold on now, like, as regard teammates, they probably started this cycle of, here, we'll have one world beater, and then we just need someone slightly less shit than him. That's happy
only
enough
one
just
pole,
to be here.
What? Only one pole in the field. Isn't that what they say?
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, I'd say they started that off now.
Who hate each other more, do you think? Those two, or Hamilton and Rosberg?
I think Hamilton and Alonso. Alonso hates his fucking guts.
I should have thrown that into the mix there. Is that like?
They'd be a pretty strong team. Actually, that's one that might have skipped by us because it's only for a year. Yeah. Alonso and Hamilton as a pairing would be.
Yeah, actually, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it would be up there. No, I think the Senna.
Serious shout, like, you think about it, and the timing in which they were there together as well, like.
Yeah, that's
right up there as well. Yeah.
Prost, Senna, still.
Should have just fucking kept this content. I might split it afterwards and put it out because it's definitely useful content.
You do a top 10.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. We can do a rankings thing and put it out there, man. Okay, right. So we've kind of touched on the racing a little bit with regards to maybe Leclerc and Perez and the pressure that was applied, but we saw many great duels throughout this race. I particularly enjoyed Ocon and Hamilton. I thought Ocon defended so well for so long in shitty conditions. And Richie, it was very good to watch. Whenever you did go to bed to watch it.
I seen the rerun. No, it's great dice between them. Like I know you're going to touch on more. There was a couple of savage dice throughout the field, but yeah, it's great battle. In fairness, to Ocon, he didn't fall asunder. He didn't held his nerve, and great bit of racing under the conditions, and no contact or no one pushing anyone off or. That was good, yeah, very good battle.
Baz, I think Alonso and Vettel coming over the line, that
was mega.
I should have actually got that clip and shared it here, although I'd probably get done for copyright even if I credited my sources, because it can be finicky times with those sort of things. But yeah, that was nice. Two greats crossing. Obviously, probably the last time we'll see Vettel doing so at Suzuka. So
yeah. He was the camera looking not dissimilar to this, looking back into his face was very interesting because he didn't see Alonso coming up the inside till the last minute. If you watch it back, he turns in
where it looks into Vettel's visor.
Yeah, you see him turn in, and then you just I could picture exactly that myself in my mind's eye, just going. He probably heard him or something, and just a little glimpse of a wing or something, and then have the back over. And what I thought was very interesting was, if you watch it again, watch how much Vettel is doing besides driving the car, if you're with me, right? So obviously at that moment, he's got the car is right on its limit of its grip, both with the front axle, the rear axle. He's got to change gear at exactly the right time, oversteer, understeer, power delivery, blah, 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 get around the lap. He's doing all of that. And he's also literally going, where is he? Looking around him, looking over his shoulder, looking at, I just thought it was a really graphic illustration of how much you have to be able to just drive the car subconsciously and then leave the rest of your capacity. And the more capacity you have, the better racer you'll be. And you could just see that really well because you're looking right into his eyes and what he was looking at. And when you watch it back, you go, yeah, the driving of a car, which is immensely difficult in those conditions, was way down his list of conscious thought. Everything else was about, everything you could see was him trying to place his car. Where is Alonso now? Where is he going? What will I do? What's the next move? And then he was just driving the car to its limit as a background thing.
Did you see Alonso's onboard in contrast to that? Where I don't blame him, because he's after catching Vettel so quick, and on his onboard looking out, not the Vettel's view, it's Alonso.
Yeah, the visor cam.
And you can see him just on exit of the corner, and you can see his hand is just getting ready to shift the gear, and he just clicks, just a shake of wheel spin, and he's and that little shake of wheel spin was enough for Vettel just to get the run, to get him on the line. Like, I was super, like, mega.
11,000, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was to cross the line.
Deadly.
Yeah, it was a great bit of footage having the two onboards, as Richie says, looking forward and looking back, especially when you're complete nerds like we are, and you're looking at all these silly little things, like Richie says, that little shape.
You can actually see Vettel's eyes, and you can see him, if he had a wing mirror, he would have. If he had a rear view mirror, he would have been looking at that too.
Yeah. And everything else happening in the meantime. Like, it'd take all of your skill just to get the cars to go around that corner at 30 mile an hour in them conditions. Never mind the speed they are doing and everything else that was going on. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. I have to say, I enjoyed looking at that bit of footage.
Mark Summers has been in touch. He said Massa Alonso was a pretty good parent too, probably in terms of the camaraderie and obviously the talent as well. They're both very good drivers. I want to move on to something that not many people are actually talking about. Which is how impressive Max was yesterday. Because everyone's talking about how he won it, everyone's talking about the tractor, everyone's talking about fucking Gasly, the budget caps and the whole lot. And obviously the fact that Max is world champion. But how stellar a drive was that once it resumed? The margin he pulled out in the end, I'm going to have to go check it up. Was it 20? Am I right in saying 20 seconds?
20, yeah, was it, Barry? 28, was it?
8. I think it was 28, yeah.
To pull out that
he wanted to come in and put on a new set of tyres at the end. He wanted to get faster, So
I think it was 28 seconds and 27 laps, I think.
I don't know how many laps we had when he pitted. It wasn't long after the resumption, and he was obviously leading whatever, and comes back out. Was it 4th or 5th? Maybe he came back out. He's back up to 1st in a couple of laps. In those conditions, I don't care what car you're in. That's incredible stuff. And you're looking at someone, for me, who is just such a worthy champion this year. And that's kind of, I'm not going to say it's forgotten, right? It's probably overshadowed with everything that's been going on over the course of the weekend. But he's been incredible, Barry, hasn't he, in fairness?
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying almost, but then it should be said. Because, now, he had the best conditions to race in yesterday. If you're leading the pack, you don't have the visibility issues anyone else does, and that's a big advantage. Don't get but yeah, over the course of the season, he's just been phenomenal. To be perfectly honest with you, he so rarely puts a foot wrong. Doesn't get there's no pressure really. I know he shouts and roars down the radio, but as I said before, you need to discount all of that because that's just heat of the moment stuff, and you're doing 200 mile an hour and something goes wrong, you're going to shout down the radio, guarantee you, no matter who you are. And if you're not going to shout down the radio, you're probably also not equipped with the necessities to be doing 200 mile an hour going down the straight. You know, it's not a buffet menu, like you're getting what you're getting, and that's it. You have to take the good with the bad. But yeah, he's just really, really, really this year. Well, I was going to say he's come on, but has he? I don't know. It's different. He's, people are saying he's more relaxed and he's more kind of computing and stuff. But when you have a car advantage like that, you can afford to do that. And people were always going back to, well, last year he was desperate, and well, yeah, if you're coming at it from a position of weakness, you have to bring something else to the party. And last year that was his kind of just. I know everyone else was saying desperation. I wouldn't necessarily use that phrase, but that's the one that was being thrown around. And this year, it's been more Hamilton-like when he's had that car. Hamilton had that car advantage, and he could sit back, wait, perform the maneuver, get to the front. If he didn't have a good qualifying, he could just wait, let the natural pace bring him forward. So I think that's a byproduct of the car advantage he has this year, more so than some sort of shift in his inner being or whatever you want to call it. But the interesting thing is not that he's done one or become the other. It's that he can be both when is needed. He has that just raw aggression and that just absolute fight that we seen last year, coupled with today I need to just sit back and let the car do the work. And that's a pretty potent combination that not a lot of people have. They've one or the other. He's got both. And I think that's going to stand him very well in his career in general, because he'll need it. He'll need to pull one personality out from the other different times over the course of his career. And the fact he has both of them there is I think is his real trump card.
Richard, I don't think he does that a lot, Barry, does he? I know he has the best car by a mile, but he's the best driver by a mile at this present moment in time.
Oh yes. Yeah,
he is the best driver on that grid by a country mile. And what you were saying there, Barry, you're 100% correct and right. Sometimes when you have a car advantage like him, he can sort of say, listen, and with such a championship lead in Suzuka, he didn't give a shit. He went around the outside of Leclerc into turn one to take the lead of the race off the line. That's a ballsy move. I don't care who you are or what position in the championship you're in. Just that raw aggression, he just seems to have that in abundance. People that say, like Barry was saying, they're saying, he was desperate. He's just massively aggressive driver. He's not and that's the difference between him and Hamilton as well. I couldn't, if Hamilton was in Alonso or Vettel or Verstappen's position, I couldn't see Hamilton make that move around the outside of Leclerc in the West in Suzuka. I honestly think he would have sat back and used his car advantage throughout the race. Whereas Max just don't do that, man. He's boom.
Would we call him a gobshite though if that didn't work out and he made contact though? Would we? No, maybe not make contact, but if he spins or something.
Well, maybe. But you see, this is the thing that keeps coming. People keep coming up and they're saying, and I go back to the best example of that was. What was the track at the end of last year where Max had done a stunning lap?
Bahrain, wasn't it? No. Was Bahrain done twice in quick succession? Was that the tail end last year and early this year? I think it might have been. I can't remember exactly. But go on anyway. I'll do some homework here.
He put it in the wall coming out of the last or the second last corner. And up until that, the lap was just incredible to watch. And I remember...
street circuit, Barry, was it?
What do you call it? Was it Jeddah? Was it Jeddah? Was it Jeddah?
It was actually Saudi Arabia.
Saudi.
Yeah.
So the lap
that was early this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think they've been there already. The lap that he'd done up to that point, up until the last corner, was just stunning. That's the only word for it, really, to watch. And it was just so ragged and so on the edge. And then he got it wrong the last corner, and everybody was like, "Oh, well, he didn't need to do that." And if he had sat back a little bit for the last corner, but what you fail to realize is, like I said earlier, you can't pick and choose the bit. You can't be, just absolutely dogged, determined person and then turn it off for the last corner.
No,
you can't. You can't. You that's what you're getting. If so they're going, oh well, if he had lifted off for that last corner, but if he had lifted off, he wouldn't have been the same person that gave himself 0.4 of an advantage over the rest of the lap. to have the facility. You can't pick and choose. Over a lap, you can't. But what he can do is he knows at the same time, I need aggressive Verstappen now because I don't have the car, and I need maybe thinking about Verstappen because I do have the car this weekend. And he does seem to be able to pick and choose which one comes out to play on a given day, which, as I said, I think is a big advantage to him. Because, yeah, like at the weekend, he was behind Leclerc and he probably just went, you know what, screw this. I don't want to be behind a car in these wet conditions. I'll go for it around the outside, like Richie said, you know. And then he was able to put the laps in, protect the tires, do the whole lot. And then on other days he just was able to just let the car do the work. That's really strong in my opinion. I think that's why he's going to be very, very hard to beat going forward. If he has not only because he doesn't need to have the best car, he just needs to have a car that's close enough that aggressive Verstappen will do the rest. And when he has got the best car, the other Verstappen will show up and do the right thing by it and make sure it's there at the end of the race. So I think that's going to be his ultimate strength over his career, in my opinion.
Will he get to 7, so, Richard? Will he get to 7? Will he get to 8?
No, I don't think so. Not because of anything got to do with his driver skill or anything like that. He was actually asked that in an interview after the race. How do you fancy yourself to equal Lewis and Michael? And he says, not going to be here that long, lads. He openly said, I have other stuff I want to do. I have other racing I want to try. And I don't want to be trying it when I'm too old for it. So I'd say if we see, unfortunately, I'd say we might get another 4 years of him, and that'll be it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either.
2-time world champion. Genie back, like, I think back
now. Unless he wins it in the next 4 years in a row, he might go 8th to 5th to equal the two boys. But I don't know. Like, I can't see. I think it's going to get very interesting now as the seasons go on, because Ferrari are going to stay coming, and Mercedes will definitely be back. So,
yeah, Barry, what do you think? What was it? Maybe you commented already? I was actually just double checking his age because I knew it was 24 or 5, but 25, yeah. Can he go and do 7 or 8? Do you think?
Look, he's got the time to do it. I hadn't seen or heard that thing Richie's referring to, so I find that very interesting. But and very understandable too, because Verstappen is a big. He loves racing cars. Don't presume that all the other F1 drivers have that same love of it. I remember watching a thing with Shoutout, and it was pretty much like, oh, this is my job and I drive cars. But you know, I don't think he even knew who won the championship 3 years ago or something. Like he's not a fan that's now a driver. And a lot of these newer guys aren't, you know, they do take it as a bit of a job. They obviously had some love for it somewhere along the line, but they're not as passionate. They're not Sebastian Vettel, who can go back and name every F1 champion from 50, 8 or something, but the first championship was, you know what I mean? They're not all like that. But Verstappen loves driving race cars. You know, he gets out of his F1 car, he gets either into a simulator or he has a Porsche Cup car that he just goes and does track days in. You know, while I find it interesting what Richie said, at the same time it doesn't surprise me, because he's probably looking at it from a point of view that, you know, I'll just stay here, keep doing the same thing and winning championships, or would it be better to do a few Le Mans, do a bit of IndyCar, you know, do a bit of
I'd say Barry has an eye on the Triple Crown. You know, I'd say he's a big eye on the Triple Crown. I'd say, and he's plenty good enough to do it. Like.
Yeah, I'm sure if he go, you know, he does seem the sort that go, Jesus, that Bathurst 1000 that was on at the weekend, that looks like great crack. I'll do that. You know, I'm going to go and do Le Mans. I'm going to go and do the Nürburgring 24-hour. I'm going, you know, these kind of cherry pick these things, and it's hard to imagine as, you know, club racing drivers looking in on the outside. But I'd imagine, like a lot of things, when you get to F1 and it's the norm, as silly a statement as that is, for these guys, it is the norm. And he might be like, he might just get bored of it. That's, you know, it just sounds ridiculous when you think about it. Get bored of driving Formula 1 cars going around the world, and earning whatever 25 million a year or something. But it probably will happen, and I just think it'll happen to him because he has that love of other stuff. I can't see Hamilton deciding he's going to go and do all these random things, and that's not a slur or a knock at anything. I think just some of them are wired one way and the other, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Verstappen going, right, job done, I've 4 in the bank, that'll do me. What else is out there? I want to enjoy driving stuff, because as I said, he gets out of an F1 car, has his own privately owned Porsche, and goes and does track days at the local circuit. Like, that's just a guy who just loves driving, and he's
I heard he's entered in the 6-hour endurance race in Mondello, Barry.
Is he? Yeah.
Yeah. I heard he put an entry in there lately. Yeah.
Mike's back in touch. Said he wants to win the Leinster Trophy. So yeah.
Well, he has to have some level of expectation. I mean, he can't just do everything.
Yeah. Aaron McKay was in touch on YouTube, and he says, I think he said he wouldn't do it in the 500. So yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not the 500. He might be more. I don't know. I just get the feeling that from what Richie said there, a couple of he just wants to tick a load of boxes, maybe.
Yeah.
So
go do shit.
Plus the other side of it. The other side of it too is your interview with Lee McKenzie, like where she says like he's like a hothouse flower. He's been groomed for this from the age of 7, like. And as she said, at 7 years of age, I didn't know what a life goal was.
Never mind have one.
Like, so he's reached his peak once, and now he's reached it again, and maybe once more. And then, as Barry said, you're sort of like looking around, you thinking, "Here, I've nothing left to prove here. I'm sick of it. I'm out of here."
It is. It's hard to. It is. I know it sounds silly to think of that in F1 in that terms, but if that's your normal,
yeah, it's your normal.
That's as normal to him as us living in our house, going about our lives. That's his normal. It's absolutely extraordinary to us looking in from the outside, but to him, that's it. That's normal. I'm sure he appreciates it.
That's where it's all like you can't go and just go wanting to win 7 just because someone else wants him to win 7. He has to do what he's
That's the worst reason to ever try and do it.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest with you, that's the worst reason you could ever have to try and you go, well, why do you want to win 7? Well, because he over there won it. Like, Jesus, if we all played that game in life, it'd be, we'd get nowhere, like, but you have to do it for the right reasons. And Rosberg was the perfect example of that. Rosberg says, I know what it took to do 1. I'm happy. I've done it. Box ticked. I'm out of here.
Out the gap.
And again, some are right, some are right. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's just everybody is wired different, and they'll have different reasons for doing everything, and we can't impose upon them our way of thinking because it's pointless. We're not the ones that have to do it. It's them boys, and to be honest, from a motorsport fan as opposed to an F1 fan, and there seems to be an increasing difference between those two things where it used to be one and the same. As a motor racing fan, I'd love to see him go do other stuff. I'd sooner he knocked F1 on the head early and went and did 5 years of other stuff, because I find that really interesting. I find that more interesting than I'm just hanging around F1 for another 5 years and picking up 2 or 3 more titles. I'd love, like when Alonso did Indy 500 or Le Mans, or some of the rally and stuff or whatever. I find that really interesting, and I'd have more. I suppose I'd rate lads that do other stuff and do it well higher than lads that just stick at
Nigel Mansell.
Mansell, yeah, went to IndyCar, won it the year after. Did a bit of touring cars. Alonso's probably the most prolific recently, but you go back years ago and the F1 boys, your Jim Clarkson, whatever, the world, they were in F1 one weekend, F2 the next weekend, British touring cars the weekend after that. Because they were getting paid. That's how they made their living. So Max Verstappen doing Le Mans, or Max Verstappen doing
Leinster Trophy,
Indy 500 or whatever the case might be, a NASCAR race or something. That's really, that'll be more interesting to me now than just
Well, look, lads, Cala Rovanpera has already been in Mondello this year. Rovanpera versus Verstappen, Battle of the Champions, Mondello Park. Get it sorted, Leon. Get it sorted. Make it sound so easy as well. Look, lads, we'll finish up because it's actually nearly 3 times the length of another podcast, which is mad.
Of the shortest race of the year.
Oh, yeah. The irony. The
Yeah.
absolute irony. Guan Yu Zhou as well, in fairness to him, or Zhou Guan Yu, fastest lap. It's a shame that you don't get a point unless you're in the top 10, in my opinion. I understand why it's done, but man, like, Jesus, in those conditions, you don't get in third, like, only, well done, lad.
Can you
know what I
imagine they did that though? To be fair, if they had got points for fastest lap for anyone outside the top 10, your pit lane would be just
You might
black,
forget about
like.
blue flag as well.
Just non-stop. They wouldn't have enough tires with them.
Break every bit of glass on them yokes and just take all the flags out of Marshall's hands. Not
Just put them out there. Yeah, the whole track is blue.
Understood. Lads, anything else to get to just before we finish up? We're happy enough.
I'm happy enough anyway.
We've hit most for Texas next, isn't it? COTA.
Yeah, that's the weekend after next. So it's mad with World Champion crown. Now, in fairness, it's a week later than what we thought. Because he could have wrapped it up really in Singapore as well, mathematically going back on it, I think. So
he could have, yeah.
Fair play to him. Well done, Max.
We never got to my favorite stat of the week, Kev, with the Perez's 11s.
Do it, Jesus! We can't fucking do the podcast.
I heard this. I don't know where I heard this, but this blew my mind altogether. Now let's see if I can remember it. So
hold on now, because I think you typed it into our WhatsApp group. So I know you are on the same device, and I will go and try and check this one.
Let's see if I can remember it.
Okay, right. Hold on for a second before you start reciting it. I just want to get it here in front of me.
Yeah,
right.
you can. Okay, Sergio Perez. This was before Japan, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, so
it was after Singapore.
Yeah,
Sergio Perez, 11 letters in the name.
Yeah.
He has been in F1 for 11 years.
Yeah, 2 out of 2.
His car is number 11.
3.
He was in garage number 11 at Singapore.
Yep, 4 out of 4.
It is 11 years since someone has won. The same person has won Monaco and Singapore in the same season.
You're fucking on WhatsApp, I know well there.
I'm not. I'm just weird for numbers. And
5, yeah.
The last one was, if I'm not missing one, that when he took the checkered flag in Singapore to win the race, the local time was 11 seconds past the 11th minute of the 11th hour.
By Rabbit, you are a winner.
That's the best stat ever. 11. I couldn't believe when I heard it.
When did you get a prize?
Yeah, I wish I figured it out myself, but I just reciting what someone else figured out. But
what was my response to that, by the way, Kevin?
Someone has too much time on their hands, which probably wasn't the most inaccurate thing anyone had ever said. But anyways,
it is a serious statistic, though. And for next thing, we'll have remember years ago there was talk about the Illuminati. Do you remember that shit that was going on? On YouTube, but if a YouTube video from any big artist, musician, whatever had triangles and these weird shaped things, other than the Illuminati, they worship the devil and all this shit. Anyway, look, lads, we do get occasional spam links on these type of broadcasts, so I'm not going to encourage any more of that shit, because generally that's what ends up coming in underneath it. Oh man, it's unbelievable. I don't know if the boys go by Hero Racing or Hero Racing, but I know Stevie Rice is involved. He says, yup, the boys. Good man, Stevie. Thank you very much. Mike Dermody.
Hero, I think it is. Kevin.
Thanks a lot. Hero, isn't it?
That's the Hondas, is it? Is that the message in the Hondas? Yeah, okay.
I thought Hero was spelled with an E, but I was in school with Stevie, so that probably explains a lot. I did 2 leaving certs as well, so we're getting on already, Stevie. We're not going too bad, in fairness. Lads,
well, you did yours and you did Richie's for him, was that it?
No, I just didn't do mine, period.
All right, we're getting giddy now. This is it. We're done.
Yeah.
I think it's delirious because we were supposedly tired after for varying reasons, and here we are. Fucking, geez, lads, you've gone for another hour there if you wanted it. But anyway, I suppose we'll call it quits at that. We will be back probably in a couple of weeks anyway. I'd say after Texas. We'll discuss when that's going to be. We did hold off deliberately. There was a thought crossed my mind to do this yesterday morning after the race, but I don't think that would have been a good idea now in hindsight. Just head the budget thing over, but just things we're hearing. But anyway, look, lads, thanks a million. Really enjoyed this evening.
Good stuff. Take it easy, boys. Take care, night.
Indeed. There we go. Shout out to PFT Travel. PFT Travel on Facebook now as well. It's not P Farrell Transport anymore. MJ got it sorted out. Rapco as well. Check them out. Our thanks to them for being with us throughout the duration. And I'm led to believe they're with us until the end of the season as well. Without their support, this shit just does not happen. So many thanks once more. Thanks to Barry. Thanks to Richie. Ronan Doherty's in touch. He says, good pod. Thanks a million to everyone who watched and listened. We're going to get the audio up on Spotify very, very shortly. And we're going to leave you with our new video. It's only 18 seconds long, but very much Irish themed.